This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. The Middle Ground Mike is fighting for truth and unity. Subscribe now or support us today. Links are in the notes. Stand with us.
Minneapolis has become a national headline, but the people who live there still have to deal with the reality. Today I'm talking with Dalia al-Aqidi, an Iraqi-American journalist and congressional candidate challenging Representative Ilhan Omar about public safety, immigration, cost of living, and what calm leadership looks like in a divided moment. This is the Middle Ground Mike.
Hello, everybody. We got a great guest here tonight on the Middle Ground Mike. We got Dalia, who is a candidate in Minneapolis, Minnesota's 5th District. She is running against Ilhan Omar. Dalia, I really appreciate you coming on here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be there.
You know, like we were talking before the show, centrist ideas, kind of just, not necessarily just centrist per se, but, people having, the option to hear all sides, like within reason and peacefully, kind of introduce yourself to people and, how that really impacts you and your thinking about it.
Well, let's start from Minnesota. Now Minnesota is under the radar. People are everywhere are looking at what's happening with ICE, what's happening in our streets. So that takes me to where I came from and who I am. I am Dalia al-Aqidi. I'm an Iraqi-American. I moved to the United States legally back in 1993. Since all my adult life, I was working with the Iraqi opposition against dictatorship and against the oppression of Saddam Hussein. Back in the 90s, a friend of mine whose name was Chris Stevens, he was the U.S. ambassador who was killed in Benghazi. He's the one who convinced me and my family to move to the United States, and he made it possible for us. And let me tell you, the process wasn't easy. The process wasn't long. We went through a vetting process. We provided evidence. And we were well vetted until we were allowed to come to the United States. I worked in Washington, D.C. until 8 years ago, and that's when I moved to Minneapolis. What's happening here affects everybody 100%. But let me tell you, I am a legal immigrant. I've been an American for a long time. I mean, I've been here for a long time. I'm not afraid of walking. I'm not white, and I'm not afraid of walking in our streets. And until now, which I live in downtown, about like whatever you guys see on TV, it's about less than a mile away from me. But I'm not afraid of walking around, of going shopping. And if it didn't happen yet, and if it happens, if I'm approached by police or ICE or any law enforcement, and if they ask me, I would answer because I haven't done anything wrong. I would answer and say, thank you very much, no go, catch the criminals. That's how it's supposed to be. We've been taught since we were kids that when a police officer asks you questions, you answer politely and you follow what they tell you to do. If you get out of your car or show me your registrations. But what we're seeing here in Minneapolis, it's a political stunt that is led by our local leaders, driven by 100%, I'm telling you, by the Democratic Socialist of America, DSA, which is very active in our district and in our state. I agree with you. The senseless death of Alex and Renee was avoidable. But this is what happens in a city when you have the lieutenant governor telling the protesters, put your body on the line. When you have a governor who's willing to put law enforcement against each other. When you have a mayor that needs to grow up. They play on people's emotions, and you know what? They remind me of Hamas because they don't care what happens to these people in the streets. They don't care what happens to the small businesses. They don't care if our city declines because that fits their narrative. This is our problem. We need safety. We need peace. Yes, we need to hold everyone accountable, and we need just to wait after the investigation. And then if anybody is at fault, then they should held accountable for what they did. Leadership matters and words matters. The leaders need to calm, need to be responsible instead of just escalating the anger of the people.
Yes, and that's key. Not instigating anger and going after solutions. That is so key, and that just seems to be the focus in this situation. Especially when it comes to the mayor. I believe the president yesterday said, "Hey, I had a great conversation with the mayor, Governor Tim Walz, and seemed like they were on the same page to try to come to some kind of middle ground and try to come to some kind of solution for going so far as it did, which is, that's a big step for President Trump because usually, him and Tim Walz can't be in the same room type of deal. So, I thought that was a huge step. And then Mayor Frey is his name. He came out and
Yeah.
pretty much, another inflammatory statement. We're not going to enforce immigration laws. Well,
I mean, come on, exactly. I mean, the shift of the policy and the change that happened yesterday, that shows you, actually, that showed everyone that President Trump cares about Minneapolis and cares about Minnesotans more than their own leaders.
yeah, it was very disheartening to hear that statement after they had seemed to come to some kind of solution.
100%, but still, Walls is still talking. We have now a new policy, but we need to remember that ICE agents are federal officers, and what they're doing is they're carrying their duties under the law. We have governors from different states threatening these ICE agents, dehumanizing them, and this weakens the public trust and puts communities at risk. We just saw what happens in 2020 after the George Floyd riots. We saw our city burn, and sadly, the tragedy that happened should not be politicized. Should be treated with seriousness. It should be treated with compassion and respect for the rule of law. We deserve better. Minnesota deserves better.
Yeah, it's the rule of law is key, and it seems
No, because people are pushed by their own leaders, by their own local community organizers, messages distributed between the protests. Who is paying for all of that? There are, not all of them, and I have to say, not all of them, but a large percentage of these people are paid protesters. ICE yesterday, they protested, supported Hamas and to support the same people, just different slogans. They just carry this that fits the narrative. On Sunday, maybe Monday there is something else, and maybe Tuesday there is something.
So, thinking of that, I know part of what you talked about on your website and some of the things you communicate is the public safety and how you want to, rebuild the departments. And I believe it said police department, and things of that nature. Like, most people want two things: safe streets and fair treatment.
Let's take a quick break.
The Middle Ground, Mike, isn't just another podcast. It's a movement for unity, for truth, for a future beyond the left and the right. But movements don't grow without people willing to stand up. Subscribe now on Buzzsprout. Fuel this mission directly on PayPal. Every subscription keeps the fire burning. The links are in the show notes. Be more than a listener. Be part of the Middle Ground.
The question
in
is
2020,
how do we
when everybody started, everybody as government and our representatives started screaming, defund the police, defund the police. Our police officers were in great danger. And the escalation of situations between people, police officers, and many decided to retire. It's like they said, oh, you know what? It won't feel safe. I'm supposed to help people. I'm supposed to make people feel safe. Now it's the same call. Defund ICE, defund ICE. We went through hell. It's 2020. Our streets were dangerous, and we still not like before. But what they're trying to do is spread chaos, and chaos is not compassion. What we're seeing put danger. What I'm if we don't want to talk about rights, We can open a discussion. We can talk to each other, and especially if we're an official, especially if you're in public office. Alone, you cannot do anything. Things don't can't be done by political party. The trick of politics is to work with your opponent, is to work together. In Congress, you need to cross the aisle. There are senators and Congress people that they cross the aisle to agree. That's how you
Yes, I mean that's key. Doing the right thing and serving people. Cost of living and government waste. I talk a lot about that here, and I'm sure the national shutdown on healthcare. Well, not on healthcare, but the national shutdown. And they tried to me, they tried to make it about healthcare, but where I drew an issue is the only thing they were talking about were subsidies, and why don't we fix the cost of it so you don't need a subsidy to be able to afford it? And I felt like that part was just completely missing. Yes. Yes. Yes, and it really, I mean, a lot of people I don't think quite realize how much immigration, legal immigration to be fair, really boosts the brain. It reverses the brain drain in America, where sometimes some of our own domestic, American born children, especially in inner cities, are struggling to hit certain marks. This help balances that out, and education is something that we really have to work on. And a lot of people from outside the United States come here and they work hard. They do a lot of things. I live close to Dearborn, Michigan, and the largest Islamic population in the United States. At least that's what they always say. I don't know how accurate that is. Yeah, but people, I see on the news all these crazy things all the time. I don't necessarily agree with the mayor there, but I go through Dearborn all the time. I eat there perfectly. I've never gotten treated any different than if I'd have went by where I live. Right. I mean, you turn on TV and people are always giving the boogeyman approach about it, and I'm like, why? These people are some of the most hospitable. I'm like, I don't mind it at all. We have a big Hispanic population in Southwest Detroit. Not one bit. Yeah. Yes. Yes, yes, and that's how Donald Trump beat well, that we know of, won the 2 elections where he was projected to lose by, every major poll, quote unquote, is he believed in, he had the different how he looked at polling a lot different, but he also believed in, I'm gonna put my message out there and the people are gonna trust me and they're gonna vote for it. And he was right. I mean, he won the popular vote by a pretty good margin this time. And I was pretty I would say surprised, but I guess I didn't expect it to be as much as it was, considering how divided everything is. And it was very, very curious. And I thought, okay, hey, maybe we're able to, especially with the amount of immigrants that voted for him. Okay, maybe we're gonna move a little forward. I kind of wish he would have taken more of the Ronald Reagan approach, where it's like, hey, if we need to, you pay a fine, we figure something out for certain folks, right? Not for obviously criminals and sex offenders, things like that. I don't know the full answer. You know, I, yes, yes, right. Oh, yes, true. Share some of those stock tips with everybody. It's if you got the inside one, the American public would love to know. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes, and that's unfortunate. Right, no, and it was, was it New York City or was it Chicago where they were giving people 5,000 or like 3,500, $5,000 a month or whatever that was on, prepaid debit cards, and you got your own right, and I'm like, "We got Americans that are," and I'm not saying we shouldn't help these people, but how can you give them that much and your own citizen that's homeless gets next to nothing? Yes, yes, you're not lying. Yes, I mean, I he always had a really good way of making things make sense, and he was so very well spoken. I read his, well, not technically his book, but it was called a book called the Ronald Reagan Diaries, and really taught me a lot about how he thought because it was his own diaries. Obviously, they had to, omit certain areas, but it was very very insightful, and I gained a lot of respect for him after that. And then I started, following a lot of more of who he was and what he did. And I tell people, I'm like, the number one thing for me that stands out that we could really apply today is the positivity. No, that's definitely very unfortunate. Kind of like looking at all that, what do you think is the next step forward for per se you and like wanting to address these things and just kind of putting that in a focus for the viewers and listeners and hopefully your voters? And the ironic part is a lot of people do feel that way, and I have seen that out in a lot of people that have spoke up in some forums, and I'm in a lot of forums, in just the podcasting, and I have seen that repeatedly. Is that she does not represent everybody, and I've seen a lot of people repeat that. At least they claim they live in Minneapolis. Do they or not? I don't know, but it's definitely true with especially with how you're saying that. How do you as I know your time's precious. How do we get people to that middle ground so that way we can get things done? How do we get those moderate Democrats to kind of come out of hiding? Okay. Right. It is. It's very difficult. God, what is it? They're saying, I think the last I looked, mortgage rates were 7.5, 8%. I'm not sure if they've lowered. Thankfully I don't need to take a mortgage anytime soon. But I could not imagine paying as much as some people are now. I mean, it's still lower than the 1980s, but they said, rates were extremely high then, but homes are so unaffordable for people. It's insane. Yes. I'm more of a supporter of in Michigan, they had to balance the budget and they went more after what the traditional term would be sin taxes. And if we need money to pay for certain things, so both sides agreed, no kid should have to pay for breakfast or lunch when they're at school. They all kind of came together on these things and they got it done. But they went after sin taxes. Okay, if we're gonna pay for this, we're gonna go after something that you don't necessarily need. It's a want. And I'm against taxes, but if that's something we need to do, I guess that's something I can live with. Yeah, no, that would definitely make me mad. And everybody there should be. In Michigan, they're starting to look into fraud and daycare in a couple areas now. It's crazy because there's so many single mothers, working widowers, single dads that could have used that money for those types of things. And maybe because they're on the borderline of, the income scale, that maybe they didn't quite qualify. Where as if we weren't worried as much about the fraud, not like that we don't care, right? It was more we knew where the money was going. Would some of these people be able to be more productive in society? Yes. 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 1000%. Dahlia, I know your time's precious. So I really appreciate you coming on. And, we wish you good luck in the election. And, awesome. I love it. I appreciate you coming on. And I hope you best of luck in the campaign. I would love to. Thank you. Have a good day.